It's a trap game, according to many people out there for the wider audience of Penn State football. Welcome to the Tailgate Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Landon Tengwall with me, and we're going to start right there talking about this particular matchup between Penn State and Wisconsin. Because Ohio State is on the other side of this game, Landon, everyone is looking ahead. Are you looking ahead past Wisconsin?
You know, I think everybody is a little bit, T. Frank. Everybody's getting excited for next week in Happy Valley. Not so excited for the big noon kickoff, but nonetheless, we got Ohio State coming to town. So, eyes are going to go ahead to that. But at the same time, this whole trap game thing has been thrown around for a while now. Now, honestly, I was okay with labeling this a trap game mid-season, and it's like, hey, don't forget you have at Wisconsin after the bye week. I even said it. But now we're sitting in a world where Wisconsin is 5-2. They're on a 3-game win streak. They're playing really good football. Luke Fickell, their head coach, is in his second year there. He's notorious for turning teams around. When he was at Cincinnati, you started to see them hit a little bit of a cycle there in their second year, and he's having the team look really good in Wisconsin, even with a backup quarterback. So, they're running the ball well. We're going to talk about all that today, but there's a lot of reasons why this is not a trap game and something that, trust me, the players, they turn on that tape Monday morning, and it's like, oh, okay, you know right away, honestly, as a player, if you're going to take that week kind of lightly, or you're really going to, you're like, okay, this is a real team. Trust me, they turn on that tape, and this is a team that they can lose to. And that doesn't normally happen, but sometimes you'll turn on the tape, and you'll be like, yo, these guys suck. Like, they're awful. But, trust me, that is not what is happening when you turn on Wisconsin's tape.
Let me rephrase this. This isn't Kent State.
Exactly.
Right. So there are certain teams in certain games where you realize you have a distinct advantage because the opponent's record, their reputation, or the film itself tells you that you don't have to take that game seriously in the same way you would for a different game. Penn State's coming off a bye, an emotional win over USC previously. But as you just laid out, let's lay out some other facts that, just to restate this, Wisconsin's 5-2. They're a Big Ten power, classically, in the hierarchy of college football teams. If this weren't a year where Penn State were ranked number 3 and Ohio State wasn't coming into the Beaver Stadium after this game, 0 people would have mentioned Wisconsin trap game in the same sentence. And then you throw on top of all of the things on the film that you just talked about, which we're going to get to here on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealership Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We appreciate everyone being here. We are live from the Field Burger and Tap. If you want to come over, say hi over the next 90 minutes, we're going to be sitting here talking ball. We've got football, and then a little bit more football to talk about today. Yeah. We'll be breaking down the offense, the defense. We spent some time watching the film, giving you some of the in-depth analysis. I'll be throwing out the kitchen sink in terms of all the stats I have today. But Landon, let's get into the game then, and let's talk about what is the most interesting thing on the field for you in this particular game situation. High level, first thing you want fans to know, what about this game?
Yeah, obviously the big news is Nick Singleton and what type of impact he is going to be able to have tonight against Wisconsin. I think the 2 games that we saw him out and then we saw him obviously not 100% himself, the run game suffered. We barely went over 100 at USC, and then for the first time against UCLA did not go over 100 for the whole season. So clearly we need to have an impact from Nick Singleton tonight to get this run game going. And that is kind of how if you want this to be a game where Penn State handles Wisconsin, the way you do that is you play a balanced game of run and pass. I'm talking 200 yards on the ground, 250 through the air. Mm-hmm. And we saw Penn State do that for the first 3-4 games. It wasn't until Illinois where it kind of went one-sided with the run game, and then we went one-sided with the pass game against USC. So now I'm excited to see, can we get back to putting this all back together? Hopefully a very somewhat healthy Nick Singleton, as healthy as you can be mid-season, because once you get to this week, you ain't healthy.
That's one of the things that I've been trying to, ride that line of. I wrote extensively this week about Nick Singleton, Anthony Donko, their health coming out of the bye week, and the impact that might have on this particular game because of some of the things that we saw on film. And I kept wanting to say, is he back to health? Are they healthy? Are they 100% healthy? No, they are not. Football is horrible on the body. This guy knows what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. He knows what I'm talking about.
It's bad. I will say, after a bye week, it's definitely better. But still, you are in week 7, 8, whatever we're in. That's trust me, that's where it's like for the guys. It's like whatever week we're in at this point, my body just hurts. I ache.
Yeah.
You wake up to go to those Tuesday, Wednesday morning lifts, and it's like, oh my God, I have to lift this morning somehow. I just had a full practice last night for 3 hours, and it was full contact, and now I got to come in and lift this morning. And then, by the way, I got to go to calculus after that.
Yeah.
So you don't get to just go take care of your body like in the NFL.
Yeah.
You got to go take care of school as well.
What blows my mind is also on your side of things, you've got to maintain a body weight that is probably hard to maintain. So you're running all the time, you're lifting, and then you've got to be putting in enough calories into your day. So, like, are you eating during calculus?
Dude, yes. It's constantly a thing that the nutrition bar, they have food for you to take because they know you're going to be running to class after your early morning workouts. So they have burritos ready. They have burritos and a shake. So that's a good way to get, over 2,000 calories right there if you put down a nice breakfast burrito. And they'll make the shakes taste somewhat good, as much as you can, protein shakes. And, but you're constant. If you're a defensive, offensive lineman, you're pretty much constantly having to feed and find ways to eat throughout the day. But it is nice. I've talked to Keith Goon Conlon, was an offensive lineman here in the 90s. And he tells me, they basically weren't even allowed to have a nutrition bar back then. It was illegal. The good old cream cheese rule. Yeah. The rule was by the NCAA that you could give an athlete a bagel, but once you gave them cream cheese, it became illegal because you were giving them a meal. Once they put the cream cheese on the bagel.
Which blows my mind that the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Administration, doesn't on a fundamental level understand athletes and athlete needs. Of course, that has been the story for the last 30 years in this particular conversation. So there's one thing I do want to ask you about on another one of these high-level things that fans, I think, are a little bit nervous about. There's the bye week conversation. We can get into that in just a second. But Camp Randall, the noise, the environment, all of those things going into maybe the offense is less effective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I've always understood that when you talk about noise in the environment is it has an effect on you, the offensive lineman, specifically in pass protection. What happens if the other team doesn't have a good pass rush? Does it matter then? Does it have the same effect?
No. When you're nervous going against an Ohio State or even if Michigan has a good defensive line, that's when the noise starts to get a little scary. When there's not a true threat across from you, I don't have that much fear instilled in me. And I will tell you this, that was my first game ever, 2021 at Wisconsin, week 1.
Yeah.
You remember Jaquan Brisker picked him off towards who was Wisconsin's quarterback? Was that was the kid that went down?
Was he
he had the 3 touchdowns in the All-American game?
I thought he was it Graham Mertz? Graham Mertz.
It was Graham Mertz.
It was Graham Mertz. Yeah.
And Graham Mertz threw the pick to Jaquan Brisker, and the rest was history. But we snuck out of that Wisconsin game in 2021, week 1, with a win. I think they had the ball twice within our 10-yard line and didn't score 2 different times.
Yep.
But I will tell you, I remember being there in 2021 and guys saying, "Hey, it is not even loud in here." It wasn't like it was hard for us to operate. So a little bit of a different environment. I believe that was a noon game back then. It's now 7:30 in Camp Randall, and also they're 5-2. So it's going to be a little bit different, but that still doesn't. I don't think Camp Randall gets to the point of we have to go silent count or something.
Interesting.
No, I do not think it. Not at all. But I will give you a quick story. I told this on my YouTube channel earlier this week. But when I was going into that first game at Camp Randall, I was a true freshman. It was week 1. And, offensive lineman, unless you're Cooper Cousins, you don't normally play week 1 of your freshman year.
Yeah.
So, but Coach Trout wants to bring me. He's like, "Hey, we want to get you some experience." I'm like, all right, so I go along, and I'm having fun. It's my first ever football, my real first football trip. I'm enjoying the food the night before the game. I get out there, and Coach Trout, he says, "All right, you're going to hold the clipboard today." And, Coach Trout, he's very anal about everything.
Yeah.
And he wants the plays written down. So if there's a 7-play drive, I have it written out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I write the plays next to it. So this is before tablets were allowed on the sideline. Now tablets are allowed on the sideline. You don't have to worry about it that much. But Trout wanted to know when he gets over there and all the guys that are actually on the field playing and they get off, and he says, what happened on, play 3 there? He wants to be able to refer back and see, okay, what was play 3? All right, it was 34
right.
Captain. All right, and let's talk about it. So I had to write it down. And so I was hearing from behind, I'm a freshman, my helmet's not even close to near me. It was like, "Hey, clipboard boy, clipboard boy." The fans were calling me clipboard boy in Wisconsin because I was a true freshman holding the clipboard, writing down the plays. So that is my experience in Camp Randall. I enjoyed it. I laughed. I thought it was hilarious.
That's also excellent gamesmanship that doesn't cross the line.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of conversation and talk specifically about what fans have done recently. that at least is a good story. Nobody threw anything. Nobody said anything terrible, at least in this particular instance of this story.
Ohio State's a lot worse. Do we have time for a real quick?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
I have to share this real quick from Keith Goon-Conlon. When Wisconsin, when Joe Paterno broke his leg, I think it was 2005 at Wisconsin, Keith had to carry him into the locker room. Keith was working as a strength intern. He obviously played her in the 90s, came back mid-2000s to work as a strength intern. And so he carries Joe in the locker room, and Joe still has his headset because they just grabbed Joe and scooped him up and took him in. Obviously, 70-year-old at the time broke his leg. Yeah. And he might have been 80 at that point. And so,
I think he was 80 from the point he was 60. Like he was
pretty
just 80
much.
for like
just
50 years.
So Keith's in there, and then Jay is the offensive coordinator, Jay Paterno, and then Tom Bradley's the defensive coordinator, and they're trying to talk to Joe. They're like, "Hey, we need to talk to you. We're trying to do X, Y, Z." And Keith's got the headset on, and Joe's screaming with a broken leg. And then next thing you know, the refs stop the game, and they come into the locker room, and they say, "Hey, Keith, you cannot be in here with a headset. You can't have a headset in the locker room communicating with people out on the field." So they basically perped walk Keith Goon-Conlon back out on the field, and he said there was like 70,000 people just staring at him. And he was like, sorry. And they resumed the game.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, good story.
Hopefully nothing like that happens in this situation.
No.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
I want to give a shout-out to somebody here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Of course, if you're here at the field, you can hang out with us. You can say hi. If you're listening on the radio, if you want to join the show and be a part of the conversation, you can always join the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, where we have a great community of people that always watch each week, and somebody who is here on a regular basis. I always appreciate these, Landon, when your peers and their parents watch the show. That makes me know that we're doing a good job. And I want to give a shout out to Corey Smith. She says, "Hey, 414, born and raised, but the Smith family are Nittany Nation now." So she is, of course, Corey Smith, the running back's mom. And this is a big game for them. Wisconsin, as she mentioned, 414. They're the big game for Corey and his family, going back out to Wisconsin with that small raid they did this summer in the class of 2024. I always get it mixed up because we've been talking about the class of 2025 for about 2 years now. Class of 2024, you've got a lot of guys in that freshman class with Corey Smith and with Donnie Harbour and I keep wanting to say Egan Boyer, but it's the other tackle. Garrett Sexton, excuse me. Garrett Sexton. Yep. So big day for all those freshmen here on the road game. We're going to take a quick break. There's a lot that happens each week. We're going to be talking about some of the implications of what happened at practice this week from the on-the-field perspective later in the show. But the main thing, as you mentioned, we're late in the season. And as much as they can, it seems now, they're trying to take some of that workload off of the players during practice. So what I'm trying to say is we're going to get to our Penn State practice update coming up next on the Blaze Alexander Family Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Here is your Penn State practice update.
Penn State offense put its final preparations together for its weekend trip to Madison earlier this week. As usual, the program opened up the first few minutes of its final padded practice of the week on Wednesday, and Blue White Illustrated was there to gather intel. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, and this is your Penn State practice update. Want to get this information faster? Join Blue White Illustrated right now for $1 with the promo code PSU1 to get 2 months of access to premium articles, intel, and content. There's a delicate balance at this time of the year between the need to keep the intensity and focus high for a football program without running the athletes into the ground. A good example of this showed up during Wednesday's skeleton passing drills for the offense. The tight ends and receivers augmented deeper routes and started the drill several yards downfield. This allowed the pass catchers to work on their route transitions without having to run a full stem on each repetition. The focus on timing, precision, and detail is still there without the wear and tear on the players' legs. Another effort to streamline the process emerged in recent weeks as well. The delineation between players you'll see on the field and those who won't take many offensive reps has become abundantly clear. The team works in stages, with the tight ends, running backs, and receivers all going to work with the quarterbacks at different times. This week, the starting tight end trio of Tyler Warren, Khalil Dinkins, and Luke Reynolds all caught passes from starter Drew Aller. The same was true of the team's top receivers, and then afterwards, when he was done working on his timing and chemistry with those targets, either backup quarterback Bo Perbula stepped in completely completely, or he rotated with the backups to take reps off his arm late in the season. Speaking of health, both Nick Singleton and Anthony Donko were at practice with the team this week and are presumably back to full strength. While it's impossible to tell from jog-through periods, Donko was at least back to his starting position with the first-team offensive line and not skipping reps like previous weeks. Head coach James Franklin says his team is in a pretty good spot after all that's happened this year.
Yeah, I think for the most part we're in pretty good position. We've had some of that kind of throughout the season. We kind of had an initial wave of issues, kind of got through it, and from that point on, I think we've been in pretty good shape.
If you haven't seen the full exchange between Franklin and the media Wednesday night, you should check out that video on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. That's the real story of Wednesday's practice. That'll do it for this week's Penn State practice update. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. More from the Blaze Alexander Tailgate Show next. Check out that video on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. That's the real story of Wednesday's practice. That'll do it for this week's Penn State practice update. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. More from the Blaze Alexander Tailgate Show next.
Blaze Alexander Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram Truck of State College. It's the new.
But Ryan, I'm going to lead off with you. There was some Penn State recruiting news which came out recently, and I want to get your thoughts on what we saw this week from one of our national reporters putting out a prediction here for a good news for Penn State football.
Yeah, we will see where this goes. But Braeden Finney, of course, we've talked about the McDonough cornerback a lot, dating back to really last winter. But of course, then he commits to Oregon in the summer, and here he comes back circling around and looks very serious about Penn State. I mean, this was a player who admitted when he committed to Oregon that he was leaning towards Penn State basically the entire time up until that final official visit. And, McDonough, of course, those connections, Kenny Sanders, Terry Smith, great recruiters, of course, stay on him. And here we go. This has looked like we might have some drama, some news to follow here in the coming weeks. Of course, he just visited for the UCLA game in early October. We'll see if he's able to make it up for what would be Washington. He has a game for the Ohio State game. They play Gilman that day, so he wouldn't be able to make it for the next upcoming game on November 2nd. But we will certainly be looking forward to seeing if he makes it to campus here for that Washington game. But yeah, Chad Simmons puts in a pick, thinks that Braeden Finney is close to flipping to Penn State. And look, Sean, I mean, I think you would agree. We've heard a lot of positive talk, especially since that UCLA visit. My thought was that this was probably going to go the distance, going down, especially with National Signing Day or the early signing period, being moved up to early December. At the time, he was talking about taking an official visit to Michigan. Well, now, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. I think Penn State's going to really press hard here to maybe try and get this over the line here in the coming weeks, but right now, there's a lot of momentum on the Nittany Lions side. And look, another McDonough guy, right? I mean, what are they? They're batting 5 for 5, 6 for 6 as far as McDonough guys that they have really absolutely pushed hard for over the last however many years, 6-7 years, I think it is. And they don't want to let one of those players get out of their grasp. So we will keep a very close eye on Braeden Finney. But Chad Simmons is putting in a pick. We're hearing positive things. I think there's a lot for fans to be excited about.
Fitz, when it comes to not just the importance of Finney with that McDonough connection, but also the quality of the prospect. Well, I don't need a ranking in terms of like 1 through 5, but where would you say he generally is on that scale of players they've gotten out of McDonough? Because to me, like, he is closer to denying Dennis Sutton in terms of the talent and the potential, as opposed to any of the other players we've seen recently. So I guess, what's your opinion on the quality of the player here as well?
Yeah, I think he's up there with Denai, with Curtis Jacobs as well. Jacobs was really highly regarded coming out as a prospect as well. But I mean, he's a 5-star in 24/7. We got him in the top 100. I think Rivals is the only place that doesn't have him as a top 100 prospect. So I believe that would, if he were to flip to Penn State, that would put him right up top in terms of.
He would be.
Top
he's number 51 in the industry, which
Okay.
Penn State doesn't have a single top 100 guy right now.
Chevrolet. For your next vehicle purchase, come to Stalker Chevrolet and save with low interest rates. And remember, only at Stalker Chevrolet will you get the Stalker Advantage with the purchase of any new vehicle.
What's up, Nittany Nation? We are back with my key matchup of the day, Penn State at Wisconsin. And I am looking at specifically the interior of the offensive line versus the interior of Wisconsin's defensive line. can we get this run game going against what can Nick Dawkins, Venga Ioane, and Sal Wormley get going? Can we get a push to the point where Nick Singleton and Katron Allen aren't even getting contact until they're 2-3 yards down the field, essentially? And if we can dominate the line of scrimmage and become more 50-50 like we were in the past, where we're able to run and pass, and you got to keep the defense a little bit more honest, I think we're living in a great world. Now, if we're back in a scenario where they're trying to take away the run, honestly, watching USC, if I am Wisconsin's defense, I'm saying, okay, Drew Aller proved himself, but he still made some mistakes. I would still go into the game plan of make Drew Aller beat me. So that is why that's my key matchup, is we have to get the run game going. The interior of the offensive line has to get a push on this Wisconsin defensive front that I don't find very impressive, frankly.
I was going to say, is that an area you think that Penn State has an advantage with Venga on the inside and with Wormley playing at a sixth-year level, where you've got those two, specifically those two big mauling left guard and right guard combination on the interior? Do you think that, as much as I think everyone still sees those Wisconsin jerseys and thinks big one-tech nose tackle that you can't move and all these, guys that eventually become Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's just say what it is. Like a bunch of guys that are going to be Steelers in the future.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Is this that group to you still, or is this an area where Penn State might have the advantage in your opinion?
No, I think Penn State has the advantage. I think Venga Ioane at left guard, we saw him just absolutely obliterate someone on that, was out at the wide receiver slot position, motioned him across, and, he went viral for a couple days. But put that aside, he's been really solid in pass pro. He has been a mauler in the run game. Nick Dawkins is someone who isn't necessarily always jumping off the screen, but he does his job, and he leads that offensive line well in his fifth year. So I think, just looking at it, number 68, one of their starting defensive tackles, is not very impressive. Just kind of a big dude, a little clumsy. I don't really think he has very good pass rush moves.
Kind of top heavy.
Top heavy, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he can get shoved around a little bit. Now I believe 92 is their other defensive tackle.
Yeah.
He's definitely sturdy. I was talking to a couple guys about him, and they definitely agreed that they thought he was a solid defensive lineman for sure. So we've seen him get through on a couple different pass rushes, but overall he can be slightly disruptive. But I just think with the veterans up front, Nick Dawkins, Sal Wormley, Venga Ioane, we'll get this done. We'll start to get some real movement for this run game.
Yeah, 92 I think has gotten better this year as well. That's been a hallmark of this team, is that they have gotten better as the season has gone on. The key matchups or the premier matchups so far this year, they haven't won those against USC and Alabama. And as much as we are kind of dismissing USC, every single game they go into, they are a good team. They have elements and facets that are dangerous, and early in the season, nobody knew that they were going to lose to Maryland. So, I don't like the idea of when a team loses, then we dismiss any work that was done against them previously in the season. The matchup is the matchup at the time. So I'm curious about this particular run game and the impact of that bye week. I know you got a couple things you want to talk about. One thing I want to get into your brain and understand is, coming out of the bye week, how much healthier and how much better do you feel, especially as a lineman who you're hitting and banging on every single play? How much fresher are you coming out of a bye week to maybe, if you did have a lingering or a nagging thing, how prepared are you going into that next game?
Yeah, it's really good for the hurt guys. And I say that, I don't say the injured guys. It's good for the injured guys. Don't get me wrong. It's good to have an extra week, but it's good for the hurt guys. And why I say that is, there is a difference between being injured and being hurt. If you're hurt, you're hurting, but you're going to play. If you're injured, you physically cannot play. So that is where the difference is. And so obviously, like Nick Singleton, he has been hurt. I mean, he was injured against UCLA, but then he played against USC. But I think it was clear he didn't look like himself all the way.
Yeah.
And so now, you got a couple things. Nick Singleton got a week under him, but then there's all those offensive linemen and all those little injuries that you guys don't hear about, that their wrist, their finger, their ankle, a big toe, as dumb as it sounds.
What are you talking about? Any of the injuries are the ones we don't hear about.
That's a fair point, actually. My favorite thing is to watch the press conference and try to watch people ask about injuries. It is my greatest joy. It really is. There's never a true response.
I tried my best this week to phrase it in the. So this is what I want to know. This is the number one thing to me, because I went into this week with one question: is Anthony Donko healthy, and is Nick Singleton healthy? Because if they are, I think because of the things you talked about, the general, I think, vulnerability of this front seven against the run, Penn State has an opportunity if they have their most explosive players back. I asked James Franklin on Monday. I said, is a dominant run blocker, how much does that add to the ability to run, and is that similar to having an explosive player? And he said, yes. Like, it is the same as having somebody who creates tangible differences in the run game as far as volume of space created. That's like having an explosive runner and an explosive receiver.
Guys, imagine if we would have had that as the first question for Coach Franklin's Monday presser. I mean, we'd be living in a much different world right now. Yeah. No, but it's hard. But seriously, though, it is super important to have a guy like Anthony Donko fully healthy on the field, because you're right. If that gap is just a little bit bigger for just a little bit longer, even a back that's not as talented or not as experienced can get through. If the gap is there and someone's quick and they see it and they hit it, the bigger it is, obviously, the better. So, and you have a guy like Anthony Donko that displaces defensive linemen and allows huge gaps for his running back to come through. Obviously, when he is not healthy, and, obviously we saw his shoulder a little bit banged up. Yeah. Well, it's not – the run game is going to
it
be
looked
hurt.
Different.
Yeah. And not the same at all to the naked eye. So hopefully that week off really did help Anthony Donko. And like I said, we're not at all speculating. We all saw, obviously, he hurt his shoulder. And I'll tell you, I went through – I probably popped – so I had both shoulders done surgically. But it's so common for a guy for his shoulder to slip out. Yeah. And it's just a ball socket joint. It just slips out. And most of the time it goes right back in. Most of the time the trainers don't even have to put it back in. But it hurts, and when it does that, like, it's just weak. You have to basically retrain. Think of like Rocky, and he has to go train in the desert. Yeah, like that's what you have to do with your shoulder essentially. So, like you have to go completely rehab it, get it back to 100% strength.
So everyone wants to know about my athletic exploits. That's why I'm here on this show. I actually did tear my labrum at one point, and I learned that, as you mentioned, it's a ball socket joint, but what is holding it all together is just all the meat and the tendons and everything. So not just for football players, it is very common, because if that's all you got going on there and you get wrenched out, like, it goes back in, but then you have to build all that stuff back up. And so it is a really interesting thing in football. One of the things I do, and I did this with you, is I see, does he have that arm brace, that shoulder brace on? Yeah. If he does, I know something's going on, and I can then adjust my expectation for whether a guy can dominate or not. Because as much as we're talking about these explosive run blockers, guys that I thought had that profile that didn't play that way, one of them was sitting next to me because of those things, and then suddenly in your season, where you had to end your season, you ended your season. Like, that happens. So these things that we don't talk about, it's very frustrating for me, Landon, because I want to give guys like you the benefit of the doubt for playing through those things. But when we don't have that conversation honestly and openly, then we can't do those things and have that conversation with any sort of context of those injuries or those playing hurts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's amazing how little sometimes people pay attention. Because I will tell you, if you have a shoulder brace on, you don't just have a shoulder brace on just for the hell of it. And there's a lot of guys that wear shoulder braces. I think it's probably one of the most common injuries that they see is a slip shoulder. And it all depends. It could be a season-ending injury, and that could just be a weak thing where Donko played exactly 7 days after it happened. Yeah. So it really just depends on the severity and how you can rehab it back. But it's a painful thing for an offensive lineman to have to go through. But you're right. No, there's definitely tells of when a player is definitely a little banged up on this roster. But, yeah, you look around, you start noticing who's wearing a brace right here. It's a cuff right around your arm. So take a look.
Is it – so I want to get to these really awesome stats, but I want to ask. So it just prevents you from fully extending, right?
It's buckled into your shoulder pads. You got to take it to the equipment guys. They buckle it in. You just can't. You can't. It doesn't come out like this. Your shoulder doesn't come out. It can still go like this, but it protects it from doing this. Barely, honestly. I don't think it did much for me. But.
Well, because you see guys who have those issues, and the number of forces from different angles that happen to a football player, like one plastic strap isn't really going to save you if you have a 330-pound guy that you're trying to hold right here if you're watching on the YouTube channel where I'm stretching out this way. Anyway, Luke McCombs, not Luke Combs, Luke McCombs says, hello from Knoxville. What's the scoop on Singleton? There is apparently some sort of conversation about him not playing today. I saw that in the chat earlier. I have not heard any of those things. Can't talk about that just now on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, but the availability report will come out during the show, and we'll have it on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to remind you, subscribe just for $1. Get 2 months of access to the site, so that gets you all that information and intrigue.
Just to be clear, I think that's the main thing people care about right now. Some person put out that Nick Singleton was like essentially questionable. There's no real report on that. We just know that he was banged up.
Right.
He clearly had an injury, and he's still coming back from it. Now, there was a bye week, so I think there was the assumption.
He was at practice on Wednesday.
And he was at practice on Wednesday, so I think there was the assumption that he is fully healthy, but he's not fully healthy. I can just promise you that. He's not, but he's going to play tonight.
So I want to get to this because there has been this question of what's wrong with the Penn State run game over the last 2 weeks, playing 2 defenses that people thought maybe they should have just racked up yards on. They should have been able to run on. Anthony Donko got hurt 4 minutes into the first quarter against UCLA, played against USC. Not only do I think they schemed around his injury, literally running to the direction where his shoulder was healthy, but also they weren't running at his side of the formation nearly as much. 20 of the 31 runs against USC were from the A-gap left. So either the guard in the center or the left guard in center were all involved, or to the left side. Some of the numbers that I think are important in terms of explosiveness in this run game, that your most explosive run blocker outside of Venga Ioane and Nick Singleton as the runner, missing those 2 players. Here's what it did. When Penn State ran behind the left guard and the right tackle through the first 5 games, they averaged 8.2 yards per carry. Nearly 10 yards every single time they went behind
Right
Venga.
guard and right tackle?
Left guard.
Oh, specifically left guard. So we're talking Venga and Anthony Donko
Yes,
specifically.
Specifically, when they ran behind those linemen, they generated 8.2 yards per carry.
Okay.
In the last 2 games against UCLA and USC, behind right tackle, 1.5 yards a carry.
So it's about seven less yards, essentially, something like that?
7 less yards, essentially, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, Nick Singleton's injury, his impact on the overall offense. In the first 5 games, they had 36 explosive runs of 10 yards or more. He gets hurt. They have 5. That is a massive difference. The number of yards they have after contact, 3.5 after contact in weeks 1 through 5, and then it goes down to like 2.6 after contact.
Yeah.
So all of the metrics of the explosiveness in the run game, your 2 most explosive players overall, you lose them, you lose the explosiveness of the offense. It's not really that hard of a conversation, and yet we were wondering, like, what's wrong with this run game? What is Andy Kolnicki? I thought he was going to make all these things happen magically, and when you lose that, you lose a certain element of the run game.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at the offense, too, Katron Allen, he is the bully. You're going to give him the ball, and you're going to grind out yards. And think of it like a run. Nick Singleton breaks off a 15-yard run. It's like, oh, yeah, that's Nick. It's like Fat Man gets, like, into the open field, like 10 yards. It's like, oh! It's like a bigger reaction because Fat Man just doesn't do it as much.
And usually when he finds somebody at the other end of the run, it's not a good time
No,
for
it's
the
not.
other guy.
He's going to put his shoulder into their helmet pretty much. So, no, he just, Katron Allen does not have the explosive ability that Nick Singleton has, and that's just a known fact. So we have been missing that from Nick, and then you add in the fact that Anthony Donko has been out / hurt, injured. Well, the run game has clearly been suffering. So, I mean, that is the biggest question for today. Can we get that back on track?
Yeah, and we've got to talk about the rest of the offense at some point. Like, I went off on all these things. You wanted to
know a couple of things I wanted to throw in.
Yeah, you want to share some stuff.
I want to share a couple, internal things kind of. So one cool thing, we were talking about a lot of the class of 2024 is from this area, from Wisconsin, that type of thing. Something cool that Franklin does, and he doesn't do this for necessarily just anybody, but let's say you're a freshman and you're going, we're traveling away to your home state. He is more than likely going to try to find a way to bring you, if you're at all contributing in the slightest. It's like if you're clearly a D squad, which is the developmental squad, the practice team essentially. That's mainly if you're a freshman and you're not on that, you're special. Cooper Cousins, Dejon Lane are probably the only
Luke Reynolds.
Those are probably the 3 freshmen that, for the most part, are not on that. Everybody else is on that. So you're not gonna play in the game if you're on the developmental squad throughout the week. but he will try to find a way to bring some people sometimes, if you're able to at all, possibly contribute. You're not going to play, but he wants to get you back around in your hometown. So I don't know who is. I don't want to, speculate at all, but I will tell you that is something that he did a lot when I was playing. So something cool that Coach Franklin does. I feel like hey, a lot of stuff has been said this week. He deserves a little bit of love. So
Yeah, it's been, like I said, you can check out some of the things that happened with James Franklin on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, where you can go see the press conference and all of the consternation that happened after that particular situation. Speaking of James Franklin, we're going to transition over into the Coach's Corner here on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, hear what he had to say earlier this week, because we've talked a little bit about what I asked James Franklin. We've talked a little bit about James Franklin talking, but now you get into the weeds about what he said this week and how that relates to the game coming up at 7:30 tonight in Madison. I'm Thomas Frankar. That is Landon Tengwall. This is the Penn State Football Tailgate Show presented by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. Here is the Coach's Corner.
Press conferences are boring, right?
That's why we've set aside the most important stuff for you.
It's Coach's Corner, powered by Your Cigar Den and Monte Cristo Lounge, with free, easy in and out parking for all your tailgating needs. Check out Your Cigar Den's new Casa Cuban Lounge on Colonnade Boulevard next to Wegmans.
The Nittany Lions are 6-0. James Franklin and company are gearing up for another matchup on the road, this time at Wisconsin. Coach heaped praise on the wide receivers group for making it difficult for opponents to game plan against.
Obviously, last week, Julian Fleming had a huge game for us, or 2 weeks ago, There's been games where Omari's been the guy. There's been games where, obviously, Liam Clifford has been the guy. There's been games when, obviously, Trey's been the guy. So I think that's helpful, too, that a number of different guys have been impactful and making plays for us. Puts some challenges on the defense that there's not just one guy. But I think overall it's been good. I think we need more of that.
It's not just the offense that's producing this season. The defense is having itself quite a season as well, even without safety KJ Winston. A big reason for that has been the play of the team leader in tackles, Jalen Reed.
Yeah, I think he's playing really well, and he's not just a guy that plays really well himself, but he impacts others. You watch him out there running the defense, communicating, checks, just does a phenomenal job when he comes to the sideline. The information he's able to give us is extremely valuable, but playing very, very well. Typically, you don't want to be in a situation where your safety is leading in tackles, but as we know, he hasn't really just played a traditional safety role. He's also played the outside linebacker position as well.
Some may say the defense has had some slow starts on the season, but Coach Franklin doesn't see it that way.
Yeah, I don't know if I would define it that way. I think we've given up yards in the first quarter, but I wouldn't say we've started slow on defense. Maybe some opening drives, but I wouldn't describe it the way you described it. I think what our defense has done a good job of is game planning and have a specific idea of where we're at, what we're trying to do this week, how we're trying to cause stress on the offense, and then as quickly as we possibly can figure out, are they playing in a similar fashion that we expected them to play based on our film study, or are they doing a bunch of tendency breakers?
After a big win on the road at USC, followed by a bye week and with a new playoff wrinkle, Coach was asked if he takes time during off weeks to scout potential future opponents.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that, right? But during the bye week, are you getting ahead on your next opponent? Yes. Are you also, with the staff sizes now, able to get ahead on some other opponents or possible future opponents and things like that? Yeah, a little bit, but again, you better make sure that the right amount of attention, focus, and respect is paid to your next opponent on your schedule, the one-and-oh mentality. But there are some work-ahead things going on, too.
That's your Coach's Corner. More from the Penn State Tailgate Show in a moment.
Welcome to the Penn State Wrestling Show. Thomas Frankar here with you. Greg Pickle, the star of today's show, bringing you the latest in Penn State wrestling news as the team gets ready for the 2024-2025 season. Just around the corner, but that doesn't prevent some of the wrestlers from going out and doing other stuff and getting, I wouldn't say final tune-ups, but more of those things to get you ready for the upcoming season and to get fans excited about the upcoming season. So, Greg, welcome to the show. What are we talking about today?
Well, T. Frank, the new rankings have come out across college wrestling in the preseason, so we're going to cover some of those a little bit later in the show, but it's U23 World Championships week, so I don't want to say it's the final time we'll talk about freestyle wrestling this year because some other events could pop up. Like I'm sure we'll talk about David Taylor when he goes to Worlds later in the year at the senior level. But U23 Worlds are here, and Penn State has Mitchell Messenbrink, the second-year Nittany Lion, who came to Penn State via the transfer portal last year and finished second at NCAA's at 165 pounds at this U23 World Championship event. So he'll be one to watch. Depending on when you're listening to this, show comes out Thursday night. Wrestling starts in, I believe they're in Albania Friday morning, very early on the East Coast. So we'll have some updates throughout the day over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on Friday. The finals are on Saturday. It's not quite the same thing. If he does make it that far, it would not quite be the precursor to Penn State, Wisconsin football that like ESPN College Game Day or Fox Big Noon Kickoff pregame shows could be.
Yeah.
But if the time lines up, I think he'd be wrestling, during your pregame of whatever choice for the Penn State, Wisconsin football game. So stay tuned for updates on that. But it's a good test for him heading to this international event, and he is the only Penn State guy there this time around at the U23 World Championships.
So what are you expecting, I guess? And I know that a lot of this is international. A lot of these guys are relatively unknown from countries that we don't cover. But what are you expecting from Messenbrink in this particular situation?
Yeah, so he obviously, just like at the college level, which is folk style wrestling, of course, he is very prominent in the freestyle scene, very accomplished. He comes into this tournament last year. He won the 2023 U20 World Championship, so obviously going up in age group as you might expect. He was also a two-time U20 World finalist before getting to the U23 age group. So I think you would have, if there were betting odds, he would either be the second favorite or the first favorite, probably the first favorite, considering how, if everyone remembers back during the Olympics, the U.S. guys in the U.S. betting markets were unsurprisingly pretty heavily favored, even though not all of them made it to the finals or won the gold medal. But I think with Messenbrink, the story's a little bit different. There's not... really, he would be considered one of the, if not the top guy in this bracket. I know Flow Wrestling had a preview and they expect him to win gold. And, again, these international events, you're not always 100% sure who has showed up and what they've been doing. It takes a little bit of legwork. But largely, the other top contender is on the other side of the bracket from him.
Alexander Family Dealerships celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr, Landon Tengwall, former Penn State offensive lineman. We are taking you down to the Penn State pregame show, which will take you into the live call of the game with Jack and Steve. And then we'll have the postgame show afterwards. There's like 3 different postgame shows. I'm not going to tell you which one to pick. I have my favorite, but you can join whichever one you would like. Landon, what you got?
No, I don't do post game shows on 7:30 nights, so I get to go enjoy myself after this.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
Good for you.
It should be fun. So I will say, fun part. We go into, you mentioned we go into Steve and Jack's show. I have Steve every Monday, Wednesday. Supposed to be Friday. Don't tell any Penn State universities. But I think Steve has something a little more important, traveling to Wisconsin. But it is very fun to get to talk to Steve, and I even use some of his points. I always ask him. I use some of his points, sometimes in my pregame, postgame type stuff. So it's fun.
Don't worry. He I don't know if I should say this. He freely used mine for 3 years, so feel free to use as many of his points as you want.
That's all right. I have a lot of my own points, but shout out Steve.
I love Steve.
I have a good grade in his class. So,
Yeah.
I just had to put that out there. Sorry.
Yeah, Steve is a legend.
He is.
The Penn State defense has been good this year. And I think we're lost in the sauce of it's not what it was last year. So I guess when we talk about the Penn State defense in this particular game, we're going to get into the run defense, we're going to get into the coverage and the game plan and all that stuff. But how do you feel the defense has played so far this year?
Yeah, good. I think the stats tell the story. They are a second-half defense. But at the same time, like you said, it's not – Manny Diaz is not the coach. Manny Diaz, and I have said this if you listen to me ever, Manny Diaz is the best football coach I've ever been around in my entire life. He is the best motivator of men. He is the best coach I have just ever seen in general. So I am, that's going to hurt. No matter how good Tom Allen is, he's not Manny Diaz, and the guys, don't feel necessarily the same way. I'm sure they love Tom Allen. I know that they do, but it's just not the same without Manny Diaz. Now, I'd say a couple other things. I think Abdul and Denier, and Abdul more so, are doing good jobs, but the sack numbers just really aren't there. And you saw that from Chop and Adisa last year. So I think that hurts a little bit. Yeah. And then on top of it, KJ Winston played all last year. KJ Winston
great point.
Would have been the best player in America, in my opinion, this year.
It's like having a fourth linebacker when you have KJ Winston out there, the way he was able to fill the run. And I say this stat, and I think this is still true. I haven't checked to see if he missed one early in the season. KJ Winston missed one tackle his entire career. That level of run defense and accountability, and Penn State has had a little bit of an issue here and there with some of the tackling. If you have KJ Winston there to clean it up, and by the way, Jalen Reed is now coming in from the field instead of being the only linebacker out, or the only safety out there filling from that sort of area, you just have more tacklers on the field that way.
By the way, only missing one tackle in your career, and he's working in space.
Yep.
That's working in a ton of space when you're a safety having to close in on people. So, the important. Thankfully, we have a great safety group that is deep.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter when you lose the best, in my opinion, the best player in the country.
Yeah, and shout out to Zakee Wheatley, who I think has gotten a lot better against the run this week, and somebody who, I think, did you say you used to call him the Slim Reaper?
Yeah.
It's funny. I look at you guys, and I'm like, he could be 200 pounds. He could fill the run. He could do that. And then you look at the way he plays and how he's done, and, he started out as that kind of ball hawk. But I think he's really turned into that complete safety, which, in the long run, that's what they need to get Jalen Reed back down to that field linebacker position. It's going to happen at some point this year because James Franklin keeps talking about it. Do you think this is the week? Do you think now that we're into almost November, Day Lane has soaked up enough of the playbook that it might be the week we see suddenly Jalen Reed is out there playing at that linebacker position, that lion position?
I just got to start out and say I love that we have made the transition into calling him Day. Obviously, Daquan Hardy was Day for a while, so Coach Franklin made the transition to calling him Day. Yeah. There can only be one Day on a team at a time.
Sure.
And so Coach Franklin made the transition, so now everybody's doing it. So I just want to say it makes me happy. But putting that aside, obviously, I think this is the week to do it if you are Tom Allen in the defense, because what the Indiana offense tries to do is they run the ball. So you want Jalen Reed in and around the line of scrimmage, and when they pass it, it's a lot of quick passes, RPO.
Yeah.
They try to get the ball out quick. It's a lot of timing routes. So he's waiting 1, 2, 3, and he's hitting the wide receiver on their break.
Yep.
You want Jalen Reed in those situations to read something, boom, go get it, and then not to mention Jalen Reed has been elite when blitzing the quarterback, and
it's phenomenal.
It's amazing, and not every time it hasn't resulted in a sack for him necessarily, and it has a couple times.
Yeah.
But it has resulted in someone else's sack, him creating a ton of pressure when he's blitzing. So a huge underrated component of Jalen Reed's game is his ability to pass rush.
Yeah. And so for fans that miss this whole thing, you're going to go into this game and you're going to be like, oh, it's the same old Wisconsin offense. They run the ball all the time. They throw when they need to. They use a bunch of play action tricks like that you've seen for years. The only difference is they're doing it from the pistol or from shotgun. It's not under center. There's no fullback anymore. But here's the story in its full conversation. Last year, Luke Fickell comes in, and he's running an air raid offense, which means 4 wide receivers minimum. Maybe you have a tight end out on the field. And they're throwing the ball last year 57% of the time. Throwing the football. Wisconsin. It did not go well, Landon. I just want to tell you, it did not go well. I appreciate somebody who learns from their mistakes and is able to adapt and continue to find a winning path forward. This year, they're running the ball 54% of the time. So that is a massive swing from nearly 60% to nearly 55% because that offensive line and the institutional buildup of linemen and running backs, they're leaning on that now, and it has produced more winning plays and more opportunities for this offense.
You can't teach an old dog new tricks, man, and that's when
at least not overnight.
When you recruit a bunch of big offensive linemen to be maulers, and you're like, hey, we're going to run spread, and then we're going to drop back 60% of the time. Let's do that. And it's like, what? Wait, you want to do what? I just came from a school where we run the triple option. Excuse me?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do, coach. You want me to go into pass pro? So it's definitely a transition. So I think Luke Fickell is starting to find that balance. Coach Franklin mentioned that in his Monday press conference that, they're starting to kind of figure it out. They can get kind of cute. They have a couple cute plays I would classify that I just saw that was very, creative. They'll also run the read option. That is something that they were doing with Van Dyke before he got hurt.
Yep.
And now even with Braeden Lock. So that's not something they run all the time, but something to, at least keep your eye on. If you're denied Dennis Sutton or Abdul Carter, you have to respect the fact that that quarterback might pull it on some of these runs.
So in this situation with this offense, the way we just described it, this has been the game plan against Penn State. Run the ball, short passes, quick passes. Braeden Lock gets the ball out in 2.54 seconds, which for everyone that doesn't know, that is fast. That is on average, despite the fact that they throw the ball down the field and they do challenge the full field instead of just being an offense that operates within 12 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, they do a lot of those things that we've seen so far from the West Virginias and the Bowling Greens and the Illinois. With that in mind, and kind of going to the theme of the show here, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, do they need to turn up the heat on this particular team to get to the quarterback? Because a lot of times it feels like Penn State is trying to get there with 4, trying to control the line of scrimmage. Maybe Tom Allen is aggressive, not as aggressive as Manny Diaz, because, again, I'm going to say this till the day I die, there's not a person on the planet that runs a defense that is as aggressive as Manny Diaz. So do you think this is the week you need to see a little more aggression from that D-line to either get home and get some run blitzes for negative stops, some sacks like that, instead of trying to do what they've done so far this year?
Yeah, I'd like to see Tom Allen get a little more creative, and I think there's a couple ways you can do that. We mentioned getting Jalen Reed in and around the line of scrimmage. He is one of the best players on the field every time he steps on the field. Don't have him 15 to 20 yards away from the play all the way on the back end. Get him near where the ball is going. So we mentioned they're going to run the ball. RPOs, they're going to throw quick. They're going to throw very quick slants, in routes, out routes, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Get Jalen Reed in there. And then, the other piece of it, too, is move Abdul Carter around. I think we mentioned that these offensive linemen, they're not really made to hold up in pass pro. Now, Luke Fickell and the offensive, they're going to do a good job putting them in situations where they don't necessarily have to do that. But third down, we know that the team is going to get into that third down package and get creative, and that is where Abdul has been moved around. So, find which offensive guard, offensive tackle, whatever it is, the center. I don't think it's the center because we watched him. It's one of the guards.
Yeah.
And which one's most favorable, and put Abdul against him because Abdul's the best athlete on the field.
Yeah.
Abdul is the most talented guy on the field. Find the worst offensive lineman and line Abdul up against him. That's just that easy.
Or what he's been good at for 3 years now, running backs. I mean, him against a running back was a checkmate in a lot of these situations. And I also want to give a shout-out to Tom Allen and to Abdul Carter, by the way, for the way he's played this year where he has been selfless in a lot of these situations. One of the reasons Jalen Reed has been so good this year is because Abdul Carter is soaking up some of those blocks and allowing Jalen Reed to get into the backfield against a running back, and suddenly that is not a matchup for the running back that they're going to win. So I do agree with you. I think in order to make sure you continue to have that advantage, especially on third down in these third and long situations, that's where you might want to switch some things up and scheme some more things specifically for Abdul. Some of the things I've seen personally this year that I think they can tweak. You know how hard stunts are to pick up at times for an offensive lineman. What's the one thing that a defensive lineman can do that makes it easier for you?
Well, if I get hands on him.
Right, but it gives you a little bit of space, right?
Comes
a little too wide.
Yeah,
doesn't come right off the hip.
Absolutely. He doesn't execute it. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, so I just think that they need to be they've had some situations where I think Dennis Sutton has gotten a couple of those opportunities, and he hasn't really done a great job in terms of making that a tight turn, getting to the quarterback, and maximizing the scheme. Abdul can absolutely do that. So I think that if there's something during the bye week that they're doing their self-scouting that I would have pointed to, maybe that would have been one for me. Last thought here on the defense before we got to get to the break.
Oh,
for you.
Oh, for me. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I know. I do think, and I would like to get up in a rush 5 guys like we were talking about. Bring 5 guys up and have Abdul over top of the center, and then run those stunts and twists. And Abdul, when you're running those stunts and twists, and you're basically trying to open a gap for him. Think of the defensive linemen. We're running those. They're essentially offensive. I mean, they're basically blocking. They're trying to take guys up and create holes for that looper that's coming around. And when you do that, Abdul Carter needs a lot less space than the average guy. He can bend a lot better, and he's a lot faster to get through the hole. So I would get Abdul Carter in those situations where he can move around, where he can be the looper and track down a quarterback, hunt him down, and get him a couple sacks today.
You know what always surprises me and shocks me? It's when people don't have any respect for data limits and they just are streaming the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel wherever they are in life. You're somebody who you take video calls when you're driving, and that blows my mind. I don't have unlimited data. And what I'm trying to say is Corey Smith, again, Corey Smith's mom is in the chat, and she says the bus just pulled up to the stadium. I'm assuming she's there. So either they have great Wi-Fi or she has zero respect for her data. And let me just say, I love you and I appreciate you for doing that. Thanks for being our man on the street and getting us that information for everyone here on the show here on 99.5 The Bus and Bigfoot Country Legends and on the YouTube channel. Doing great work and being a part of the team. Corey, thank you so much. I appreciate that. We are going to take a break. We're getting to This Week in Penn State Sports because there's more than just football, believe it or not, that goes on with the Nittany Lions. And we're going to get to that now on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Show. We'll be right back with the Penn State Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.
It's more than just football at Penn State. Here's This Week in Penn State Sports, brought to you by Bobby Rahal Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Rahal Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at BobbyRahalLexusofLewistown.com.
The calm before the storm. Penn State sports teams were all off from games Monday through midday Thursday, but now the action has returned. The Penn State women's volleyball team played their first ever match at Pauley Pavilion, and it could not have gone better. The Nittany Lions took the West Coast matchup 3-2 over UCLA in Big Ten play. PSU now improves to 19-1 on the season and currently sits third in the women's volleyball rankings. They continue their California road trip tonight at 11 p.m. in LA against 16th ranked USC. Almost 1 week ago, that same women's volleyball team hosted their annual Dig Pink match, which they swept against their then number 14th ranked Minnesota team. The matchup had an extra special meaning as coach Katie Schumacher-Cawley announced her breast cancer diagnosis on October 17th via Instagram just a couple days prior to the match. The loud Rec Hall crowd roared throughout the night in honor of coach Schumacher-Cawley. Don't even get me started on what happened yesterday. 8 different Penn State teams were in action, from swim and dive to basketball and hockey. Speaking of the ice, Penn State men's ice hockey kicked off their 2-game series against St. Lawrence last night at Pagula Ice Arena. Game 2 of the series had the puck drop just a short while ago. As the football team departed for Madison, the University of Wisconsin's soccer team made its way to Happy Valley. The first whistle for the Big Ten matchup against the Penn State men's soccer team is scheduled for 7 p.m. tonight, just prior to our kickoff in Wisconsin's capital city. This was This Week in Penn State Sports. Back at the Tailgate Show in a moment.
Is this a trap game for Penn State?
Mm-hmm.
And Penn State avoid the trap game? And it's been asked and discussed in a number of other different ways as well. And I have a pretty strong opinion on this. And we'll have our predictions up on Thursday at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And I'll just give you a little sneak peek. Like, I am at the point now about this game where I am going to be either very right about how it plays out or incredibly wrong. I have left myself almost no gray area at this point. And we'll get into some of the reason why when we get into the full game preview a little bit later in the show. But this whole idea of a trap game for Penn State coming out of the bye and looking ahead to Ohio State, I just don't buy it. And I feel like if there was not a bye week last week, maybe I would be a little bit more willing to buy into the notion of it being a trap game or a look-ahead spot or what have you. But I just don't, number one, think this Penn State team operates that way. It never has under James Franklin. Can you point to some times where maybe it was sloppier than expected ahead of I'm sure some people would probably maybe want to call the UCLA game a quote-unquote trap game with the USC trip on deck. Mm-hmm. Not sure I'd buy that either, but I would maybe allow that conversation to play out a little bit. I don't see this game as a trap game at all. I see it as one Penn State knows it's going to a very challenging road environment. Prime time, where Wisconsin has historically been very good in prime time in Camp Randall, and it knows what's at stake, obviously. So I just am not buying the notion of this being a trap game. I'm sure that comments in the chaps are probably all fired up, but I
far everyone's agreeing with you. You know,
that is
I
a
think,
surprise.
Well, this is why I would say, Greg, we have a very smart audience, which is always awesome. That we have the chat kind of gets it. Here's the other thing. Wisconsin's 5-2. It's not like, I understand they lost to Alabama and they lost big to USC. They were competitive in both of those games. This is a team that has a winning record. You're going on the road in a primetime environment. All of the markers around trap game usually are that it's a bad opponent. And this is not a bad opponent. There are many ways, we'll get into here in the preview in just a second, of how this team stacks up, that they have something that can challenge Penn State probably to the highest level we've seen so far this year. So there's no, and this is the other thing, like Mech Engineer puts it up here, define trap game. Greg, I think you laid it out of like it's an opponent you overlook because there's another opponent on the schedule that takes more of your attention. I don't think you can overlook Wisconsin and from the brand to their play to all of these things the way that people have given it credit, the way you've talked about it, of what you've been dealing with. So I don't know. I agree with you. I generally don't think that that's a thing in the way that a lot of people think it is. I think fans are afforded the ability to think that way. I think we can talk about Ohio State. I know Friday I'm going to be watching Ohio State film to get ready for the game afterwards, but it's not the same thing.
Retirement Community. Enrich your life on Valley View Retirement Community's 50-plus acre campus in Big Valley, PA. Award-winning residential, personal care, skilled nursing, rehab, and memory care for older adults.
Blaze Alexander Family Dealership, celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. We're going to get to around the Big Ten in just 1 minute, but we are at the Field. Wow. Professional broadcaster with great words and things. We are at the Field Burger and Tap. For people who don't have dyslexia. And Landon, we were joking about this. You have a lot of memories of being here as a football player, right?
Absolutely. We would come here actually as recruits because if you were on, it kind of depended. There was a lot of rules. But every once in a while, they could like kind of pay for a meal if you're on like official visit, that type of thing. Right. So yeah, would love to come here, and then Coach Franklin would always have the recruiting anytime like it's an official visit. I would always want to come because I'm like, yo, invite me. Like I don't even care if it's like not my position group. I'm like, if we're at the field, invite me. I'm gonna come. I'm gonna get some wings, and then this is what we do. We get a burger, you get some wings, and you get the wings to go. You get some fries, you enjoy a milkshake, and then you still get take something to go. So I've always loved the field.
That's a heady play. Have a full meal and then get a full meal to go.
That's what it is when you're a player in these recruiting, especially when you're coming to somewhere like the field. You plan ahead. You're like, I'm going to be hungry later because we talked about earlier. You constantly have to feed as a player. I get free food that basically Coach Franklin is paying for. I'm going to go at it, especially if I'm at the field. I'm getting wings and a burger to take home.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic,
the burgers are amazing.
They're amazing. Yeah. I have to read off. There's a couple different Coach burgers here, but I have to read off Coach Franklin's burger. Turkey burger with arugula, tomato, olive tapenade, goat cheese, and a whole grain roll. Does that? I feel like that couldn't emulate James Franklin better. Like that's that type of burger. I know that I'm not. I'm an offensive lineman, so I'm gonna go with they got a
barbecue.
They got a Lancaster
onion
here.
straws.
It's like it's bacon. Big burger, that type of thing. Barbecue sauce, onion straws. That's me. But yeah, cool place. Come check out Burger Tap and Field.
I love being in the middle, having bacon and avocado on a burger. I love just the avocado. So good. Let's talk about around the Big Ten. USC survived. Everyone that put the fire isn't out, but they did beat Rutgers 42-20 last night.
Was anybody even awake for the start of that game? I wasn't.
I didn't know it happened.
It started
the answer is no.
Started at 11 Eastern. That was pretty impressive. I got up to use the I got up to use the bathroom like 2:30, and I checked. It was still going on. I was like, okay, well, this is impressive.
Oregon is up big over Illinois right now. Northwestern at Iowa is happening as well, and Maryland at Minnesota going on right now. But some of the ones that were final from earlier, Nebraska and Ohio State, a surprisingly close game, 21-17, where it was closer than that for most of the game. And then Indiana-Washington. Indiana spanks Washington 31-17. They continue to be a juggernaut in the Big Ten. Indiana, juggernaut in the Big Ten. But you want to talk about the Ohio State game because I know there was a lot going on that you saw this afternoon.
Yeah. Couple notes. Dylan Raiola, I know he's a freshman. Don't ever call him Patrick Mahomes ever again because he missed. There was a couple throws that he just missed the receiver for a touchdown that was open. And there was a couple times he just didn't see a wide receiver that was open for a touchdown. So that aggravated me. Even though we wanted Ohio State to win as Penn State fans, we did not want them to lose coming into next week.
Right.
That if we were to beat them or even lose them, that either way that weakens us. So obviously we wanted Ohio State to win. But just watching it all unfold, the basically one of the final drives, there was a catch by a Nebraska wide receiver. He got hit. There was a targeting. He also kind of fumbled the ball. Ryan Day then was kind of on the field, but everybody was on the field because it was a big review. They were reviewing, was it a catch, was it a fumble, and was it targeting? They came out that it was a catch fumble, and then there was also targeting on top. Ryan Day goes bananas inside of the numbers. Onto the field. And I get, and the whole argument is that he was, everybody was kind of on the field. But if you want to be on the field, you don't act a fool.
Yeah.
It's like they allowed you to be on the field. It's like you're a kid. You're allowed. You get let up to go to the bar for a second as a kid. You're gonna act a fool. You're gonna get kicked out real quick.
Right.
Ryan Day's out there on the field acting a fool, and he gets a penalty. But as usual, the Big Ten referees bail him out. They give him a sideline warning when he was at basically midfield throwing a temper tantrum.
Right.
And they said, "Oh, it's okay." And I'm pretty sure it actually was their second sideline warning of the game. But just overall, it made me angry. Dylan Raiola just couldn't get the job done. Ohio State looked lackluster. They lost their left tackle. Their offensive line looks really shaky. They can't run the ball. Will Howard is an okay quarterback.
Right.
That's where we're at right now. They also he's not their starter, but number 20, forget his name, linebacker, they will be missing him. He's a key depth piece, I'd say.
Okay.
I compare him to Dom DeLuca's kind of a starter, but kind of a linebacker that plays a decent amount.
Right.
They will be without him for the first half because he was ejected for targeting against us. So
Gotcha.
We got slightly better today already for next week against Ohio State.
Yeah. Got to get through this game, which we'll get to our predictions here in the final segment. But that has been an interesting situation with Ohio State this year. They've steamrolled a lot of people. They lost a close one to Oregon. But you don't get the sense that they are as bulletproof as the amount of money they spent this offseason would make you feel like they are, given that I agree, they had a run of quarterbacks. When you think about the number of players they had that were not just NFL players, but really high-level college football players. And then when you fall off that cliff, do you have the scheme to be okay, now we don't have Justin Fields. Now we don't have C.J. Stroud. Do you have the schematic and the institutional knowledge of how to adapt?
Well,
and I feel like Ryan Day has really searched for that to the point that he brought in Chip Kelly and kind of abandoned, at least from what I saw previously, what they were as an offense. They are now a different offense that wants a quarterback that runs, more of the Urban Meyer style, as they were kind of this pro-style, throw the ball down the field, explosive play offense previously. And now I just feel like they're kind of lost in that wilderness of what they want to be.
Yeah, a couple things on that. I saw they showed Chip Kelly. He's been enjoying the Ohio State food culture. I'll put that out there. He looked a little hefty. Sorry to call Chip Kelly out. That was something I noticed. But no, but how do you feel? I don't feel bad for a team that has Emeka Buka or Jeremiah Smith or everybody that they have. They have Travion.
They had Travion Henderson, and then they went out and got Quinshon Judkins. Yeah.
Are we serious? That is honestly the only us, as far as running back duo. They have a good comparison of saying I think Nick and Katron just work better because they're so different.
Right.
But they have a very good running back duo at Ohio State. So you don't have you know what? Welcome to not having a top 3 quarterback in college football, Ohio State. and you basically had that for 10 years straight. It felt like maybe even longer. But you didn't have that with Kyle McCord, clearly. I think 5 interceptions. 3 of them were pick sixes for Syracuse on when they played Pitt Thursday night.
Thursday
that
night.
That was rough. I think everybody was kind of excited because it was an undefeated Pitt against a 5-1 Syracuse, and ACC football did not disappoint in the fact that it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, when you're going up against Thursday night football because you just like, well, we're not going to do it on Saturday.
Fun fact.
Might as well do it on Thursday night.
I went up to a Pitt, my freshman year of high school, I went up to a Pitt Thursday night football game. Me and Blake Corum, we were at the same high school at the time. And they have the same facility as the Steelers, the Pitt Panthers and the Steelers. And 2017, every AB, Le'Veon Bell, they were hot. And there was a Rolls Royce coming out. We were coming in. And I was like, oh, my God. And this guy put down the window, started talking to someone. I'm like, oh, my God, that's Antonio Brown. And it was the coolest thing ever. And it's so funny how just like a short, 7-8 years later, it's like now you see Antonio Brown and it's like, oh, he's a clown.
Yeah.
But back then I was mesmerized as a diehard Steelers fan.
I had the same thought. There was one point, I want to say 2008. Maybe it was 2009. The Packers had the greatest tandem of good guy quarterbacks between Brett Favre, now in legal trouble, from taking money from social services in Mississippi.
Oh, my God.
And Aaron Rodgers, who was the next great guy quarterback, who we all know now is just kind of crazy. So, perception changes over time as people reveal a little more and more who they are.
It is. Well, it's amazing. We live in this podcast world now where everybody is open. Aaron Rodgers goes on Pat McAfee once a week and just talks.
Yeah.
And, they kind of egg it on because it's great for them. And they'll egg on, conspiracy theories and his ayahuasca trips. And it's it's just not a good look for Aaron Rodgers. And he enjoys being different. And people looking at him almost like he's a creature. He likes that. You can tell he likes that.
Yeah.
And he just has, I think what I will say is I think fans have soon realized these football players aren't as high up there as we put them.
They're not all Landon here. They're not all going to be on air and put coherent sentences together that I can relate to that guy. Sometimes they're eating their boogers on Monday Night Football and telling you that there's conspiracy theories out there about what you may ingest in microchips and stuff like that. Anyway, we are in dangerous water right now, so I'm going to try and steer this ship a little bit back closer towards land. Let's talk about the Penn State offense. We skipped over the passing game earlier in the show, and I want to just touch on that here because you said do it again. That's going to be the mentality for Drew Aller and the wide receivers. I've been really impressed with Aller, and I've been really impressed with his development this year in really meaningful ways. And I know that everyone's going to look at those 2 interceptions in the USC game and be 3 interceptions overall. He had that final fourth quarter drive, but blah, 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 blah. I think those interceptions are part of his growth. That he was throwing backside reads on timing and rhythm and instinct. And he got caught a couple times. But he also did that on fourth down with pressure to go throw the ball to Julian Fleming for a first down to extend that drive. I think if you don't look at that in totality as a good thing, I think you're missing the story. So coming into this game, and I gave maybe Wisconsin's secondary a little more credit because I didn't really think they were going to be any good, and then they made USC fight for it a little bit, and I thought they made Alabama fight for it a little bit. And then when you play one-on-one, you play one-on-one, and if you lose, it's a touchdown to Ryan Williams. Doesn't that also apply to Penn State this year with that quarterback? Because I would say Aller's the best quarterback of those 3 that we just discussed between Alabama, USC, and Penn State.
Yeah, and I think Drew Aller, he has a good opportunity today to deal some dimes because they also really lack a pass rush at Wisconsin. They are third worst at getting pressure on the quarterback in the Big Ten. Only third worst to USC and UCLA. It was the same stat earlier. I found interesting. Offensively and defensively, I found multiple stats where they were right in the pack with USC and UCLA. And I'm like, that just shows how different Wisconsin is.
Yeah.
Luke Fickell has changed their identity. That they basically have this, they're very you can identify them, group them with a USC type team.
Last year they led the Big Ten in tempo.
That's insane.
Up tempo with 340-pound offensive linemen that are playing in a 2-point stance. I was like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be a train wreck for the next 3 years until Luke Fickell gets fired. And now here we are where they are playing to their strengths and they have this offensive line. And I think the defense is still in transition. And one of the things that I think is interesting is James Franklin mentioned Mike Tressel, I think, is the defensive coordinator. He's from the Michigan State coaching tree that Penn State has played against and has given them some trouble throughout the years, going back to the time when Mark D'Antonio was at Michigan State. Do you think that schematic familiarity is a good thing for Penn State this year because they understand that system historically, and so they would know how to attack it, even if it is in a slightly different iteration with this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely plays a little bit of a role when you have a familiarity of what a coach runs. Yeah, you know a little bit. And also when you're talking about these other, these coordinators that, obviously Tom Allen's big in the Big Ten, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, there's some familiarity around there. But real quick, I just want to go back. I had a point about USC.
Oh,
and
sorry.
The time of Drew Aller's interceptions. There's a reason why we feel good about Drew Aller, and that's because he threw them, a little bit earlier in the game, and then he made up for those mistakes.
Yes.
And he led that game, that drive. And obviously the third interception came after that, but that was a Hail Mary. I don't really count that. So he had 2 interceptions that he learned from, and my biggest thing is he came back with swagger. We haven't seen that from Drew Aller yet. It was like
he went to the sideline and was like chucking his helmet and screaming in the bench. I love that from my quarterback.
It's different. It's different than than what we have seen in years past from Drew Aller. So it makes me excited. Like, he took a huge step against USC. Let's see if he can do it again tonight against Wisconsin. But I think that game meant a lot. And like you said, those interceptions were part of the growing pain for Drew Aller.
Well, that leads me into the conversation about it's not just him, it is the receivers, and part of that is those two teams had dynamic receivers that if you were in one-on-one, and that's what Wisconsin plays. Interestingly, they play a lot of man coverage and then cover 2, which to me are very different coverage families. Like, it is an odd combination of like tahini and blueberry or something weird like that. Like, it's something you don't get together all the time. I've been watching a lot of Great British Baking Show. I apologize. So
I was wondering where that came. As like a drink, maybe. I don't know. That sounds okay. Like the tahini on the rim or something. Sorry.
Next one, just put peanut butter on the rim.
Yeah. Well, have you had? Wait, do they have peanut butter? I think they have peanut butter flavored wings here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm like 99% sure.
You would know better than me.
And they're good too. They're very good. I just have to check real quick because I've had the wings here a bunch. Either way, their wings are absolutely fire here. But yeah, they do it right here at the field.
So all the way back to the thing I was trying to get on before I got distracted by 2 or 3 tangents. Does Penn State have a receiver that causes heartburn for the defensive coordinator and concern when he's playing man coverage? Do you think Amari Evans or Trey Wallace have gotten to the point where now Aller's going to have somebody that wins in one-on-one when he has to go down the field, which is what those teams did that put up big points on Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, that's the biggest question for me is, can we have someone take that next step outside of Tyler Warren? And we thought we had that with Trey Wallace after week 1. And it feels like when we go to Trey Wallace, he delivers. Like, I'm surprised we don't give him more balls. I'm surprised we don't give him more 50-50 balls.
Yep.
I'm surprised Drew Aller just doesn't look his way more because for the most part, it's like, when he's targeted, it seems like fairly good things happen.
Yeah.
And he makes good plays. So I'm like, let's go to Trey Wallace more. And Coach Franklin talks about, being, having whatever. We have 4 different receivers with over 100 yards in a game. That's cool. But guess what? When he's like, you never know who's going to pop off. But okay, when
sometimes
they take away,
you need someone.
You need someone. We know we have Tyler Warren. He is going to hurt you.
Yeah.
But then you're not worried about anybody else. It's like you're just hoping someone's going to pop off.
Yeah.
I think you have Amari Evans to test them deep.
Yeah.
But I think you have Trey Wallace maybe on a deep post today. Test that out. Give him a 50-50 ball.
Yeah.
But get Trey Wallace more involved on that intermediate passing.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, and I want to ask you this question. First off, you can put it on your bingo card. Whenever you see Amari Evans in the slot, he's running a big post. He's going to run down the field. They're going to throw him the football. It happens once a game. I don't know exactly when it is, but it will happen once every single game until it doesn't. Secondly, the dynamic, and this we got to get out of here soon. So the dynamic between Tyler Warren, number 1 wide receiver on the team, number 1 pass catcher on the team, and your number 1 wide receiver, Trey Wallace. You can only have a first target on every play. You can only have 1. Do you think that specifically when it comes to Trey Wallace, Tyler Warren is eating into some of those, we're designing this play to go to Tyler, so we're not going to be designing a play that goes to your number 1 wide receiver? Do you think that's part of the dynamic that's going on there in the offense from a scheme perspective? Because a lot of the stuff, Landon, is opportunity driven. You can only do with the opportunity you're given, what you can do.
100%.
Okay.
I even did a film breakdown after USC. You can check out my channel, Landon Tengwall, on YouTube. They scheme Tyler Warren open all the time. And I literally said in my video, I said, hey, can we do this for Trey Wallace? Because it is evident that we find ways to get Tyler Warren the ball. We try to run rub routes on the goal line to get him touchdowns. We put him at fullback. We put him at center. We put him at tackle. We put him everywhere. Let's do. I'm not saying put Trey Wallace at center.
Yeah,
but
and you don't want to put him at tight end.
Yeah. But let's scheme up some stuff for Trey Wallace where we are going to get him going and continue to build that rapport with Drew Aller.
We're going to come back for our final segment, predictions about what we think is going to happen in this game. Next on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show on 99.5 The Bus, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
You will experience amazing when you get behind.
All right, well, let's see what you think then, Ryan. We'll start with you. Our game predictions here to end the week on the BWI Live Show. What do you think is going to happen? Tell us how you think the game is playing out and what your prediction was this week.
24-14 is my score. Look, I feel like Penn State can get into the 30s too. I just feel like I could see their offense starting slow off a bye week. They've kind of started slow in quite a few games, and that's what's going to limit this. Like I said, I can see 14-10 at halftime, somewhere in that kind of ballpark. I could even either way, Wisconsin maybe leaning, whatever it may be. But I fully expect Penn State's defense to take over in the second half. Penn State's offense, especially in the run game, to take over in the second half, just like they did against Illinois. That has been an issue for Wisconsin against the top teams that they've played. They have worn down in the second half, and I fully expect Penn State to be able to do that. Obviously, let's see if Nick Singleton's healthy. I think he should be by now, hopefully, after a couple of weeks to rest. And, he obviously was able to play against USC, so it's nothing major. But I see this being another heavy dose of ground game. Maybe Aller gets at 200 yards passing, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's more than 200 yards rushing.
Fitz, what do you think?
I've got Penn State 27, Wisconsin 14. Shorted me 3 points there, but
my bad. Wrong graphic.
Yeah, I know. Ryan Barker is going to come after you. No, I think that Penn State's going to have an opportunity. I think it's going to be close in the first half. I do. Wisconsin's been up and down in terms of fast starts. They've kind of hung their hat on it through this 3-game stretch, but obviously you go back to the opponent, it matters. So they got walloped right off the bat against Alabama. So you just keep going back and figuring which batch of games you want to compare this to. And, obviously I think with Penn State, you got to side with Alabama and USC. So I think Penn State's going to have an opportunity to, sort of flesh out that gap in the second half. They've been phenomenal in the third quarter and maybe get a turnover or two. It'd be nice to see them going in that direction. I think the running back is very good. I think the offensive line is, solid, which makes them a good college offensive line. Penn State's defensive line probably going to be tested a little bit more than they're used to, but they're going to have the opportunity to make some plays there on the back end as well.
Yeah, and just because I haven't really talked about it in detail, I think the center for Wisconsin, I think 67 is his number. Really athletic guy, could get pushed around. 71, really athletic for being 6'8", but is a 6'8" sort of athletic where if Dennis Sutton gets under his pads, that's going to be a problem for the right tackle. And that's something that I think ultimately in these situations, talk about a good challenge for Penn State. I think these are good challenges that they can overcome. It's interesting with the number of analysts, with the changes to some of the things in Penn State's structure. I think they come out hot after this bye week. And also, I'm believing in Andy Kotelnicki as a leader on the offensive side and Drew Aller as a quarterback, that they are going to get off to faster starts, which means also the points total as well. So they have not reached that 40-point total regularly this year, but 30s are manageable. But Ryan, I'm going to lead off with you. There was some Penn State recruiting news, which came out recently. And I want to get your thoughts on what we saw this week from one of our national reporters putting out a prediction here for a good news for Penn State.
Family Dealerships. It's time to lock it up.
You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up.
Here's the expert predictions for today's game.
One of the most successful tailgate shows that we've done so far this season, because we didn't talk about the secondary all that much, but we did get to peanut butter wings, blueberry tahini, and Coach Franklin's burger order here at the field. So I think we nailed it on the show today. No notes. But let's get to our predictions for today and wrap up any last details or thoughts we have about this particular game. Landon, let's rip the Band-Aid off, give our predictions, then talk about our X factors and keys to the game. So what's your prediction here for the show?
Yeah, I'm going to go 24-20 Penn State. I think it's going to come down to the last drive. Yep, that's. I think we're going to see. I don't want to necessarily say the offense hit a wall. I hope we can get going. But there's every excuse in the book, and I said this a couple weeks ago. But there's every excuse in the book coming off the bye week, 7:30 at Camp Randall, to come out a little bit slow and lethargic. And so that's why I have a little bit of a lower score, but I think Wisconsin's going to play a tight game. This is not at all a trap game that everybody is dubbing this.
Yeah.
And I think that Wisconsin's going to come out. They're a very well-coached team, and they're going to run the football and try to control the clock.
But that's what a trap game is. It's a game where it's close, and it shouldn't be, right? Third-ranked team, unranked team. That's what everyone's talking about, because if it's a trap game, it's because Penn State should be rolling, right? I have 31-17, and this is the thing that I keep giving. Early in the season, I gave the Penn State offense 40 points in certain predictions, right? Because I thought they were capable of doing that. And, they've hit 33. Low 30s is what they've been capable of so far this year. So that's really where I am in terms of what I've seen from them. But my point is, I believe they can get to that each game. I believe in the people that are important in these positions when it comes to Drew Aller as the quarterback. And it comes to Andy Kotelnicki as the offensive coordinator. I think I trust both of those guys to do what I expect of them. And that is to produce winning football on offense. The details are, is Nick Singleton healthy? Is Anthony Donko healthy? If they are, I think Penn State could maybe even put this one away early. On the defensive side of the ball, I put in my prediction on Tuesday because that's what the format of our week goes. And I hate that because I'm doing I'm trying to watch the film, and I did not get to a couple things early in the week. I think Braeden Lock is playing better than I saw early in the year, and I still had some preconceived notions about him from last year. So 17's probably a little low, but I'm a man of my word. I said it earlier this week. I don't want to give 4 predictions. I don't roll that way. I agree with you. I think they can score in the 20s. I think they can do a little bit more. You were mentioning during the break, when it comes to the Penn State defense and the coverage there, you think that they're going to come out and dink and dunk a little bit. Why? And do you think they can – is that how they're getting to this close game that you predicted?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we've seen. That's all they've shown us so far this year, that they're kind of susceptible, especially coming out early. Tom Allen, it seems like, like you said, you mentioned, sometimes he will come out and press man, but it seems like sometimes underneath stuff really is there for the opposing team, and then Tom Allen likes to start to kind of clamp down on that as the game goes on. So I'm curious to see how that is going to look coming out, and just giving you guys kind of an overall roundup. Wisconsin, it's a completely new offense, different look. They're going to run spread formation. Think USC-looking offense. They are going to throw the ball fairly quick. They will test you deep. Braeden Lock, when he has time, he has a pretty deep ball. He has put some really nice film on tape when he is not getting hit, being able to hit some wide receivers deep. So I will give him that. But they're going to look to get the ball out quick. They're going to run a ton of inside zone. They're going to pull some offensive linemen. They're going to run RPOs, and it's going to be a lot of hitting receivers right out of their breaks. So timing routes.
There's a lot of stuff that does remind me a little bit of the Penn State offense, where they like to run zone, and they also like to pull players. So I think those are two things. There's one thing I want to get to here quickly, because it's something that I remember from this week. I'm emptying the premium stats from this week that I found because they're irrelevant here in about 3 hours. When it comes to Braeden Lock, under pressure, 1 for 5 turnover-worthy plays in that situation when he's scrambling, specifically when you move him out of the pocket. If they can get him on the move, this is the thing, is there's a lot of kill switches for Wisconsin. I don't think there's as many kill switches for Penn State in terms of things that will short-circuit their offense or their defense. Do you have an X factor or key of the game? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't want to do that. What I want to, can you go, you had it up on your phone, the availability report for today. There was a big one missing today. Can you just give us the highlights of who's in and who's out?
So out is obviously Kevin Winston Jr., Caden Saunders. Quentin Martin Jr. Is out for this game. There was a lot of talk, and pretty much everybody else to be expected. Nobody is questionable. Quentin Martin's the big one. Quentin Martin is out, so Nick Singleton is going to have to be ready to go. He's going to have to be full freight, get him involved, and Nick Singleton has gotten really involved in the receiving game too.
Yeah, and that means Corey Smith. The whole show comes back to Corey Smith tonight, where he has an opportunity to be there.
Corey, thank you.
That does it for us here on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. Thank you so much to everybody who stopped by. Full house here at the Field Burger and Tap. Thank you to Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. We'll be back with our various postgame shows here, and you can hear the pregame show coming up next on 99.5 The Bus and Bigfoot Legends. We'll talk to you later.